Welcome back. Today, Jesus continues the Sermon on the Mount, and he moves beneath behavior into the inner life. Now, for many, these verses have felt heavy or intimidating, so we're not going to rush them. Jesus is not trying to expose us for punishment, he is inviting us toward wholeness. So, let's walk through this gently together. Today we're studying Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 to 48. Jesus looks beneath the surface. This is part of the sermon where Jesus stops speaking mainly about rules and starts speaking about the heart. For many people, these verses have felt heavy or intimidating. So let's walk through them slowly together. In this particular section, in verse 27 to 28, Jesus begins with something everyone already knows. You have heard that it was said by them of old time, thou shalt not commit adultery. That's Matthew verse 5:27. Then he goes deeper. But I say unto you that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. That's in verse 28. So Jesus is not adding new rules. He is revealing where brokenness begins. Sin does not usually start with action. It starts with direction, where the heart is turning. That's in Proverbs 4:23. So Jesus is not condemning desire. He is protecting people from being reduced to objects, including ourselves. This is not about shame. It is about freedom. So what's the principle here? Jesus invites healing at the level where damage actually begins. That's the heart. So next is Matthew chapter 5, verse 29 to 30. Jesus then issues language that can sound shocking. Thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out and cast it from thee. In verse 29, he says, and again, if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off and cast it from thee. And that's in Matthew 5:30. So let's be clear. Jesus is not teaching self-harm here. This is not punishment language. This is protective language. Jesus is using loving exaggeration to say, take seriously whatever pulls you away from wholeness. This is the language of a physician, not a judge. So sometimes healing requires honest boundaries, not because we are bad, but because we are worth protecting. So here's something to reflect on. What quietly pulls my heart away from peace? What boundary might actually be an act of love toward myself? So next we're going to go to verse 31 and 32. Is where Jesus then speaks briefly and carefully about divorce. It says in verse 31, it hath been said, whosoever shall pull away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. In a culture where women could be dismissed easily, Jesus places responsibility on the one with power. This is not about condemnation. It is about covenant care. Throughout his ministry, Jesus consistently stands with the vulnerable. And if this passage touches pain for you, past or present, hear this clearly. Jesus speaks here with compassion, not accusation. Next is about integrity of speech. In Matthew 5, verses 33 to 37. Jesus turns to everyday honesty. Swear not at all, but let your communication be yea, yea, or nay, nay. And that's verses 34 and 37. In other words, let your life be so truthful that you don't need layers of promises to be believed. Jesus is not calling for perfection in speech. He is inviting integrity. He that speaketh the truth showeth forth righteousness. Truth spoken gently is enough. What's the principle? A healed heart produces honest words. That's Matthew chapter 12, verse 34. Next, in verse 38, Jesus addresses something deeply human, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Then in verse 39, he says, but I say unto you that you resist not evil. So Jesus is not really asking people to accept abuse. He is inviting them to break cycles of retaliation. He knows how easily pain multiplies. This teaching is not weakness. It is strength with restraint. Here's something to really think about. Where do I feel justified holding on to resentment? What might freedom look like instead of retaliation? Next, we move into verses 43 to 48, where he talks about loving your enemies. It says, then Jesus says something that feels almost impossible. Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, and pray for them which despitefully use you. Jesus does not say this lightly. He knows how deep wounds go, but he also knows this. Hate binds us to those who hurt us. Love, sometimes quiet, sometimes distant, sometimes prayed through clenched teeth, loosens the grip. Then Jesus concludes in Matthew verse 48, be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. The word perfect does not mean flawless. It means complete, to be whole, mature in love. So the final principle here is that Jesus does not call us to be perfect people. He calls us to become whole people. So in closing, I want you to think about this. Jesus looks beneath behavior, beneath anger, beneath desire, and what he wants most is healing, not punishment. So if today you feel exposed by these teachings, that does not mean that Jesus is disappointed. It means that he trusts you enough to invite you deeper. He speaks to the heart because he cares about the whole person. And he walks with us patiently, gently, every step of the becoming. So thank you for being with us today. May the Spirit continue to fill your heart and draw you closer to Jesus Christ. So if this message blessed you, I invite you to subscribe and share so that we can spread the gospel of Jesus Christ together. I'll see you in Lesson 5, where we will cover Matthew chapter 6. See you then. God bless.